it is Melly, and today, in honor of the fairy pack that recently came out, I am bringing back a cottage living build. The reason for that is because I'm heard of people who don't really have the money to spend $40 on a pack, and to be honest, I wasn't really a huge fan of the fairy tale pack, but that's a whole other thing. So this build, something about it is it's the first time that I was really playing around with the landscaping tool. I mean like the terrain tool, because usually I just keep my terrain flat. I usually never like how my hills turn out. But this time I decided to play around with it off camera, and that's when I got the idea to do this build. So over here I'm just trying to figure out the general layout I want to do. I saw this picture on Pinterest that's been kind of in my mind for a few months. If I could find it, I'll put it over here. But I really like the idea of having like the two doors, one on the side of the house and one to the other side. I don't know the layout of that actual house, but I kind of pictured that section being the kitchen. So over here, like the place I'm not doing the roof, that area I already knew when I was doing this that would be where I'm putting the kitchen. So the roof I did have a bit of struggle with, not with the shape this time, because of my last build I really had like how to do a hollow roof shape down. Not hollow roof shape, but just that raised roof. And I didn't have to put in my own walls, which really made it easy. I could just use the cottage living ones. Oh yeah, another thing about this build is no CC at all. It just uses cottage living and high school years. Maybe I used a couple of the wolf stuff, but I don't think I used enough that's relevant. So I was kind of mad at EA right here because I kept trying to put down. I didn't want to do a thatch roof. I wanted to do these shingles, but I couldn't find the matching color, so I ended up having to do a thatch roof, which kind of upset me because that's not what I wanted. Um, Also, a lot later in the build, I'm gonna have to change the positioning of that because it was poking through the walls into the upper level. So that's sad because I really like that positioning. I also played around trying to put the stairs over here. That did not work out. So what I instead did was just smooth down the terrain and added a little pathway, which I felt looked a lot nicer. But first I'm just going off and like adding a bit of details and stuff, making the ground look a bit realistic. And I'm putting down this gravel path, mixing up some of the dirt over here. I went a bit overboard here. I don't really like that, so I erased it. And I just add some little dirt splotches to make it look like this path has been going up and down for a few years. Then I throw in a door over there, and I really focus on the landscaping of this build. I love doing landscaping so much in my builds, and because I never really play with like cottage living, I made a couple other cottage living builds actually. One I posted on my Tumblr a month ago, so this is like my second time doing a cottage living build that I'm posting. So I don't really play around with it too much, but I really loved all the greenery I saw on Debug. I actually watched a video before this to get some tips on how to do landscaping, and I felt it really helped. I'll put the link to that video right over here. So I'm just mainly putting down plants. I really wanted a little flower field, but to be honest, I wasn't playing with any mods, so I feel like it kind of looks out of place that I didn't have the tool mod to put some flowers going out of the plot too. But I try my best to work around with it. I didn't want to put any mods into this build because I knew the moment I turn on my mods, somehow some other mod would get put into this build, like some random piece of furniture I would forget. So I just didn't want to risk that. So putting down some plants from debug over here. I was abusing the debug in this build. Like most of the greenery in here is just debug items, which I thought really helped because in that video that I watched, one of the tips that she gave was to use the items from debug to match the landscape of the world. So since I'm using plants that are from the Henfer and Bagley world, then all of the plants match like the ones in the area. So I thought that was pretty good. Now I'm again playing with the landscape over here, trying to make the hill shape a bit better. I'm trying to avoid any awkward clipping and stuff. So, and I wanted to make sure I was covering the back of the house too. Oh, my builds. I feel like if I don't put a backyard, the back of my house just gets completely neglected. So, and over here I just flattened out the terrain so that my chickens can actually function. Because, that's the worst thing, downloading a build and nothing functions. In fact, I was originally just going to put that this build isn't functionable, but I did play test it, unlike EA with their builds, and it is functionable. Yeah, that's the word. And everything seemed to work fine when I was playing with it, at least all the base components. I don't know about like small other hobby objects and stuff. Okay, funny thing about this corner is I could not make up my mind what I wanted. So first, I put down this roof over here and I start making a greenhouse trying to utilize the new walls we got. And I really didn't like that, so I deleted it. I think I logged off for a bit to go eat dinner and I came back on and I was like, wow, this is terrible. So I tried making a shed and I want to see how long this shed lasts for. And as you can guess, after playing around with some shapes and trying to figure out how to put it on a roof, I give it a stare and I'm like, this sucks. So I went back to that original, I forgot what it's called, thingy, stable, for the cows, the thing for the llama and the cows, the little shed over here. So I'm just trying to figure out the landscape to make sure this thing's laying flat. I think I'm going to free mode at some point, just to check to make sure everything fits fine. This car over here, I think that's what's giving me a hard time at the beginning. So I do think that might get its placement moved a little bit, that shed, but for the most part, that's the corner it's going in. And I put down some plants over here outside. It's a cottage build. I'm not really thinking of farmers when building this. A lot of my builds do have a more of a farmer focus. So I was thinking more of maybe like a couple who has some chickens and a cow, because this house I did actually want it to at first be like 3 bedrooms, because I know it is so stereotypical of me. All my builds are like 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom, but this one was only 2. And the upstairs level technically isn't a bedroom. It's kind of like a loft area, which you'll see in a bit. I didn't really know what to do with it because I couldn't really place down a wall in there. It was so small. So over here I'm trying to figure out what windows I want. I was going to use these originally, but I really wanted asymmetry in the front, but I decided just to stick with a symmetrical layout. So I just used these windows and used the red. I chose red just because the bushes around the house, there's those little red bushes with the flowers or fruit. I'm not really sure what it is on it. So I'm placing down the windows. I didn't really know what to use up there, but I knew that there had to be a window in the upstairs, because by that point I realized that part of the upstairs is going to be a bathroom, the other half a bedroom. So I'm using some of the trellis from high school years. I thought it blended in quite well with all the nature. Guess I was thinking there for a second. And then I add these random debug roses. I don't know, I just felt like adding it. Putting down some more plants. I tried playing around with the roof update, but I couldn't really find something I liked on that roof, to be honest. I put a chimney, of course, in the place in the house that there won't be a chimney, but there won't be a stove or fireplace, but that's whatever. You can pretend it's coming from the kitchen, maybe, from the oven. It's an old oven. Placing down some more of these trellis. I wanted to put a little phone out there because I was thinking oh, this house, it's so far away from everything else. Maybe there should be a phone. Nah, I don't need that. Somehow this plot has a landline, so we'll stick with that story. Which, by the way, I don't know how. Actually, no, I do know how I survived without it. But the phones they added from the little nostalgia thing, that little event they had going on, I don't know how I lived without them before, because I didn't have a CC alternative or anything. I just straight up just didn't have a phone in any of my builds. But I know the answer to that is because I wasn't building really enough to care for it. I didn't really start building a lot until earlier this year, or actually end of last year too. I was building, and I was having a great time doing it. And I really love building for YouTube, honestly, and for my Tumblr. Especially for my Tumblr, honestly. That's how I got into it, because when I'm building for YouTube, it does get a little bit stressful sometimes because when I'm recording, the timestamp I have is sitting there, and I know that this computer it has so much storage, but still always freaks me out when I just see the number getting higher and higher, and then like just the idea of like having a camera watching me doing the building process. So for the most part, I'm done with the outside. I do go back and add some other details to the landscaping, but from here on out, I'm mostly focusing on the inside. This living space, it was a bit challenging. I really went out of my comfort zone doing this because of how small it was. I wanted to make sure I had at least 3 seats in here, so at least a love seat, and then like a chair maybe. I originally was trying to fit in all 5 seats in here, but that didn't work because I was like, no Sim's gonna be able to walk through this. Because as general rule of thumb, you want to make sure you have at least a full tile for your Sim to walk in. So I wanted to make sure I had that, and I'm playing around over here, still trying to figure out like the coloring. I kind of wish I put down a light when I was doing all this because that was messing me up. And then I end up going in with some white paneling. And I have this little wood texture from the event. From the little fairy event they did. I had a little wood texture around the fireplace, but I do end up changing that out. I put down this carpet, which is honestly one of my favorite items from Cottage Living. I love that carpet so much. Oh yeah, I also used a lot of the plant stuff. Actually, I didn't use a lot of plant stuff items. I should really learn what that stuff pack is called, but it's the plant stuff. That's how I will always refer it to. So, I added like it was like the blooming something, blooming garden, blooming thing. But oh yeah, so this is something I don't really do. I usually don't have my TV just hanging out in the open, but that was the only way I could fit it for this build. So right there is basically the layout that I'm using. So, and I'm playing around, adding books and stuff. I also wanted to focus on adding lots of details in this build. Because I feel like my builds, they definitely are a bit weak on details or very CC reliant on just using how the objects come. So I was kind of challenging myself not playing with any CC or mods, just having to use the packs as they are. So I also added this desk over here because I was like, that'd be fun to have. They have that little typewriter in this pack, so I really wanted to put that into the build because it's so much fun. I honestly have no idea if this area is functionable, but I think it should because I didn't add anything between the chair, so I believe your Sims can use it. So I'm putting down these blinds over here. I always use the Nostalgia Living Builds blinds when I play with CC, but this time I had to improvise a bit and use those blinds, which I actually have done that in my base game builds before. And then I'm just adding some plate decorations. And I find this well. I think it might have been a debug object. And I found it and it made me really happy. So I put it down because I was like, oh, there's like some water, the well. I don't think that's how it works in real life, but we'll pretend. I'm honestly not happy with how I placed things on this fireplace. I feel like I could have added a lot more. I really like the whole desk area. That's like one of my favorite parts of the build. Like that in the kitchen. I really liked how this kitchen came out too. Even this little entrance area. I liked everything minus that fireplace because there wasn't a lot of objects I could place on it. And anything I could place on it, I already used somewhere else already. So I didn't want to repeat too much. So I'm just trying to fill this thing with clutter. Like, it is filled to the brim with clutter by the end of this build. I kept going back to it and adding more because I was in the kitchen and I found more stuff that could work there. I also found these buckets. I added one to the fridge because I was like, I should add a bit of storytelling to this. Maybe someone was bringing a bucket from the well and trying to get it across the bridge, and then the kitchen set on fire and they forgot. I don't know, but I'm over here and when I was originally thinking of doing this kitchen, I wanted the dining table to be in the middle and then counters on the sides. which I've done something similar to that before I think it was like a couple builds ago, I made a CC build with this kind of farmhouse aesthetic. I don't know if I posted it, but it's on my Tumblr. It's honestly one of my favorite builds I've done so far, even though it's a style I don't really like. But it was pretty cool, and I did that, and I kind of want to replicate that again. So, but it didn't end up working out because I knew the Sims wouldn't have the space to move around the dining table and the and the cabinets. If I made this area like one tile bigger, it would have worked, which is funny because I originally intended this area to be a lot smaller. So I'm adding in the sink and everything, and I'm just trying to add in a lot of clutter and putting in my jars. So I was having a bit of fun playing around with this. At this point, I still don't realize how I completely forgot to put in a fridge. So one of these cabinets do go away later in place of a fridge. But I think it was more important for our Sims to have food than to have like a cat statue. But actually, all the clutter pieces I just used elsewhere. So I kept finding like other pieces of like grains and stuff that I was throwing outside, which would make no sense because I don't own seasons, so I'm not thinking of like rain and stuff doing this. I'm not thinking of any logic making this build. I know there's like some random table from high school years like behind the house also. So there wasn't a whole lot of logic into this. I'm just placing down things as I go. Every time I find something, it goes somewhere. Right there was just like a little chicken fountain that I put near the cow. Back to cluttering that table over there. I was bouncing quite a lot. Usually by the time I'm like almost finished with a floor, I start bouncing between areas. So, and by the way, for that bay window, I actually found out while doing this build that in order to place from it, you have to place from outside the window. So like if you're facing your camera inside and trying to place it directly onto the ledge, that won't work. What you have to do is you have to raise the object and then put it from the outside to get it into the window. So that's the way I learned from here. And I'm making the bedroom. I actually already have a bit of lore for this house as I'm doing it. I kind of want to try making storyline videos even, but I'm not the biggest like role player when it comes to The Sims. I'm not the biggest storyteller. I'm a big storyteller, but I don't really care a lot for playing the game as it's intended. I mostly just like building and making Sims and making a storyline hopes other people can play it. I always forget to upload them to my Tumblr because I didn't really come up with a good setup to upload my Sims yet. But what I tend to do is I like with every build I make, I usually make a family that goes along with it. My recent builds not so much, but a lot of my base game builds, because they're all part of my new Crest save, which once that save is completely built in like a year or so, then I'll just upload the save as it is with the Sims already in it. Like they already have their levels and stuff, and I already have like a storyline going for them. They already have their careers. So I feel like that's nice just so that there's a bit of like it just feels more real to have it. You can either play as the household or you can just have them in your world. And again, all of the Sims are base game too. So those are always up on my gallery. So I'm making a bedroom over here. I made it with the idea of like a male and a woman couple, like very heterosexual couple, because like all my other builds for cottage living have actually been lesbian couples, so that's funny. But first I'm putting a man and a woman in here, and that's also kind of ironic because the woman's gonna kill her husband in the storyline I made for this. So spoiler if I ever do decide to make that. I found this little stool object. I have no idea where it came from. I remember using it a lot in my builds last year, and what shocked me is it is not from Cottage Living. It is from the base game, so that's kind of interesting. Right now I'm moving on to the bathroom, and and I didn't really know what wall I want to use and stuff, so I'm just adding in the walls, and I was originally trying to fit a bathtub in there, but I decided to save the bathtub for when I get to upstairs and focus on putting sinks and stuff instead. I was trying to go for like a kind of like a rustic vibe when doing the bathroom, but again, because this was such a small space, I didn't want to have too much clutter that the whole area wouldn't be usable. So I'm putting in the towels, and I'm going back in with those blinds because I just really liked how those blinds work. I used those in the kitchen too in a different color. And then I'm just putting in like some paintings, and I didn't really know what to do about the weird darkness and lighting in here. I actually don't play with any shaders at all, so I'm pretty used to this lighting in my base game builds and in all my CC builds, so it wasn't a huge issue. Over here I had another dark corner area, so I then moved on to the nursery area, so this is what I meant where I had to move around those two things, those two windows, because when I went in, they're like sticking out, so that's pretty sad. But I was also going in using the similar colors and textures. When I was making this build, actually, the first half of the build, like the exterior, I was listening to the audio play for The Grapes of Wrath, and then for the second half of this, I found the Sherlock and Co. Podcast, and it's pretty funny. It's like if Watson was a podcaster and not writing a novel, so it was pretty funny. I liked it a lot. So I was making a little nursery, which also goes along the storyline I was thinking. But honestly, you could always change this room. Maybe I'll make a recolor of this room with every time aging up the sim, and then just keep uploading those rooms onto gallery. Because I know a lot of people like to play family storylines. I actually don't play a ton of family storylines, but that's what most of my builds center around. So I'm just trying to decorate this nursery, fill it up. I have the bassinet in there in case you want to start from pregnancy and then have the sim go from there. But usually I just make my babies in cast and then play that way. So adding in some plants. I'm just trying to make this look super cute. Again, dealing with the awkward dimness and making sure that everything is settled before I move on to the bathroom. I have a little radio made to play lullabies and stuff. And I really love these shelves from high school years. They're some of my favorites, so I fill those up with toys. So, rare time I actually don't just throw the toys on the floor for my Sims. So, and I put some more books because it's important for kids to be reading. So, yeah. And then I fit in the bathtub because, of course, if I'm making a house with a baby in it, we have to have a bathtub so you don't have a stinky child. And I actually really liked how this bathroom came out. Again, kind of went out of my comfort zone with the way I positioned that sink over there. And what's funny is this whole time I was doing this build, unless I was exiting, I only saved it twice, which is so risky. So I'm over here putting in a trash can. I really like this yellow color. I use a lot of yellow in this build, so I just went along with that. Put down some shelves and decorated them with some of the towels. This hamper over here. I know that there's a hamper from high school years. I'm not sure why I didn't use it. I kept forgetting I used high school years already for other parts of this build. So I kept avoiding it for some reason. I was like eyeing it down the entire time I was making this. So over here I'm just going back to fixing any weird lighting. So like this whole last minute is just me, or like 3 seconds, it's just me fixing lighting. I go outside, turn it nighttime, and I add these little lily lights. And from here, I'm basically done with the build. I just add some little details, a bench, and that is the build.